Okay, so for lesson five, you have some homework set that needs to be completed by lesson seven. So your class teacher would have made that available for you on Teams, and you just have to read through the questions and answer them about Galen. So it's a Galen review homework. Um, so lesson five is fairly simple. It's mostly comprehension. So after you do your low stakes quiz, you then have to read through each information. So sorry, I completely missed that. The actual title of today's lesson is How Were the Sick Treated in the Middle Ages? So what you actually have to look at are what's being done in the Middle Ages. How are people literally being taken cared of? So things to think about is how were they diagnosed? So how did people actually find out what kind of sickness they had or what illness? How were they treated? And actually who did this? So what you're looking at over here is one, two, three, four groups of people, and it is just comprehension. You're reading through each piece of information and then filling in the gaps. So each box will have the words will be in that sort of area, um, and you just have to do that for each box. So we have women there, physicians and surgeons. Some of them they're already split for you, so it tells you how long they have been training, the influence of the church, treatments that they may have prescribed, how they kind of believed what sickness you had. So consultation. So um, when you go for a diagnosis to this person, how would they dictate what sort of illness you actually had? Um, and you just have to literally read through it and filling in the gaps. So that shouldn't take you too long, which is why I'm also going to talk about lesson six in this clip. So, lesson six, you start off with an image. It's really important to take a long look at this image. So, for lesson six, we're looking at how much medical care was there for the sick during the Middle Ages. So, you would have already just studied um, who is actually doing, who's actually looking after people, what are the roles that existed at the time. Um, and over here, we're trying to think about what things were available for us in terms of medical care, and also being able to make the distinction between what we call medical care, um, treatment, and medicine, and generic care, so general care. And that would be things like food, shelter, care, and hospitality. So the word hospitality is kind of our big focus here during this lesson, because the actual definition of hospitality is being able to provide care and food to someone. And the word hospitals actually originate from that word hospitality. So what you're actually looking at in this image is a middle-age hospital. Now you have some pointers asking you to concentrate on certain things, but if you actually look at this image, you should be able to notice that ultimately this hospital, I say with air quotes, is in the church. So ways that you can kind of take notice of that, and this is something that you should be annotating, is that you've got Jesus over there on the cross. You have clearly what's an altar here. You've got the fact that this is a church. Over here, you have people within a church. So these women over here, most likely they are nuns. You've got some form of priest or bishop, perhaps monks, all looking after these people. And again, if you really, like I said, for this image, you're going to want to put a lot of attention on what's here. So if you actually see what's happening here, you should be able to identify what actually happened in a medieval hospital. So if we take notice of the people, we can pretty much identify that these people are typically quite old and they don't look particularly well, so they're aged. We can also see that what these people are providing, we have food, we have drink, we have people on their knees, perhaps prayer. We have people taking care of people, sewing. Well, this is up for interpretation. Perhaps these are dead bodies. Perhaps we've got clothing. We've got, interestingly, patients in this hospital. There are 2 in a bed. So what we're trying to find out in this lesson is how much medical care was there for the sick. So straight away, we need to be able to make a clear distinction on what we consider to be medical care. So when you think of medical care, you need to have a think about what does that mean to you? Generally, when we think about medical care, like I said before, we would be thinking about treatment, diagnosis, consultation. And what we're trying to think about, and we should be able to identify by the end of this lesson, that in this medieval hospital, there's not a lot of medical care just from this image alone. But instead, what we see is there definitely is a lot of care, so providing food, shelter, hospitality. What you have to do, so I would suggest you really take your time to have a look at that image to truly understand what a medieval hospital was like. Then what you have to do is read through these cards here, and they are numbered for you 1 to 10. And what you have to do is, as you read, I would highlight any key information about each box, something that kind of is the take home for each box so that you know what medieval hospitals were like. And then what you need to do is you take that number, so we'll do 7 because that's the one that's modelled for you already. So if we read 7 together, then we're highlighting any key information. So although there were many hospitals set up in England, the vast majority of people were cared for at home. So cared for at home. We know that straight away that tells us in the Middle Ages, most people were taken care for at home. It was expected that women would care for their family when needed. They would help make the patient comfortable. So this is their form of care. And prepare meals aimed to restore the patient, as well as mixing herbal remedies. So it tells us here what women were doing and how people were being cared for. The next thing that you have to do is, after you read through and highlight the key information, you then have here a graph. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. And what you'd be doing, so for some of you, you may already have the 7 placed modelled, but it's not on my version over here. But all you'd be doing is putting the number where you think it belongs. So if we look at the graph, we see hospitals, so a place typically run by the church, which provides hospitality. Or is that talking about the home, where people would try natural remedies and pray? And then you need to, again, make that distinction whether you think it's care or medical care. So I would suggest that you first determine whether that box is talking about hospitals or home. This is obviously talking about being cared for at home. So we know that it's going to be somewhere in this section, and we need to find out which kind of quadrant, so which area it's going to be in. We then know, again, really focusing on our own definitions of what medical care is versus care, we know that this is not to do with treatment or diagnosis or consultation or surgery. This making people comfortable, preparing meals, that's a lot to do with general care. Herbal remedies, some people may use as treatment. So we may consider that although this is mostly about care, it's a little bit more towards this end because it does talk about herbal remedies which can be seen as medical care. So I would put that here versus putting that all the way down here, which suggests it's simply just care by yourself. So in that quadrant, because we know it fits just like you would do coordinates, it's about being taken care of in the home and general care. So what we would do is you would put in the number and just a brief sort of summary. So I might write here, women took care of people in the home by making them feel comfortable, making meals and herbal remedies. So the highlighting activity is designed to help you write that brief summary. So all you'd have to do for each one, do the same thing and place them on the graph. And by the end, you will have a bigger picture of what things were like, were people being taken care for in the home or in hospitals, and whether that was medical care or care. For this next section, what you have to do is assess how much care was provided for the community during the Middle Ages. So there's just a few pointers for things that you have to cover. You need to be able to make that distinction between medical care and general care. You need to consider who provided the most medical care. So was it the church, aka the medieval hospitals, or was it women at the time? And that information will be found and will be clear to you once you complete this activity here. So to start you off, it says here, during the Middle Ages, and then you can decide, circle whether you think a lot, some, or limited care was available for the sick in the local community. Then just provide an example or two. Try to stick to petal paragraphs whenever you're writing in this booklet, just because it's good practice. So stick to writing a petal paragraph about whether you think what kind of care there was available for the community during the Middle Ages, but just be sure to really make that distinction between what general care and medical care is, so that you're truly answering that. Because to be able to answer how much care was available, you need to be able to identify what kind of care was available. And once you finish that, you have an extension which you can attempt to do, or you just write down your summary. So for our summary for today's lesson, again, just to look back at our title, we're thinking about how much medical care was there for the sick during the Middle Ages. You can figure out in 3 bullet points what are the big take homes. So something about a medieval hospital. So a comment about who was there, what kind of care was available. A comment about women in the Middle Ages and what kind of care they provided. And then just a general comment of making that distinction between medical and general care. So once you've completed your summary, you should be focusing on those 3 points to complete that. Thank you.